made a horrible mistake that cost legitimately $4 million. Like a single mistake cost Lila and I $4 million. And when I told Lila, she said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." She's like, that's it. That's it. You can't ask for more than that.
What was the mistake?
It goes into buying a company that had a related party kind of buyer who then disappeared at post-transaction. So that $4 million just evaporated. But, it's a totally different, horrible story. I know that there are wives out there who'd be like, "You idiot," Yeah, and she's just like, "I know you're sad. I'm sorry that happened to you." And I mean, I can't tell you what a blessing it is to have a partner like that. Well, they say that most marriages end because people are disagreeing about money, right? I mean, they're fighting about, we need to make more money. You're not making enough money. We're spending too much money. I feel like there has to be an understanding amongst the married couple that this is going to be hard, and we're not going to have the money that our friends do, and we're going to appear to be driving pieces of crap cars when they have like a nice car, and it's a level of sacrifice where I feel like if one or the other isn't in, I don't know if you do it. We were so fortunate in that we were both exactly aligned. To this day we are, right? I mean, we're aligned on kind of valuing kind of experiences over physical stuff, and not buying kind of for status, and we were that way at the beginning. It was great for me because Lila and I had 100% trust.
Welcome to the Founders Journey podcast. Inspiration, education for founders by founders. Welcome back to the Founders Journey podcast. Appreciate everybody coming back here with my co-host, Peter Dean. Good to see you, Peter. Seems like forever since we did like 5 in a week, and we haven't done a podcast in a few weeks. So
I know, it's weird because we were cranking them out, and then we had our little summer break. Now we're back. I'm psyched to be back.
That's right. Well, the last time we took a summer break, I think we took like 1.5 years off. So we're getting shorter summer breaks now. Good to be back and be with Adam Rossi, who's our guest today. Love having Adam on the podcast today. It's a great story. Adam started a software company with his wife at the age of 24 called Platinum Solutions, and became an Inc. 500 company for the fastest growing companies in the U.S. And then sold to a publicly traded company for a bundle. So we're going to get into that before he turned 40. And now he runs a family office and is an investor and a dad, and get into Adam's story, and especially talk about what it's like to start a business with your spouse or your partner, which is great. So Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Greg, Peter, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, all right. So Peter and I were joking around before. And before you came on, and we were talking about what it would be like. Peter and I are both very happily married. We've been happily married for
very long time.
Well, Peter and I are happily married. We can't speak for our spouses. They may not be as happily married as we are, but we've been both married for over 25 years each.
And just to be clear, I'm not married to Greg.
Yeah.
No, we are not.
People have wondered if we were a couple times, but
these are independent spouses that we have.
Yeah.
And neither one of us can imagine starting a company with our spouse. So talk about that journey a little bit. What got you and your wife? Is it Layla?
It's Lila.
Lila.
Yeah,
okay.
Lila, yeah.
So when talk about that journey and starting a business at such a young age with Lila. Were you even married at the time you started?
We were, yeah. So we got married really young. We met at Virginia Tech. So we both were in a MBA program. I was an engineer that went back to get my MBA, still pretty young. Lila was a business major and went straight through to get her MBA. Met in school, got married the last semester, and moved to just a neutral place where we both thought we could get a job, Northern Virginia. And I've got to say, I mean, I don't know how anyone really founds a business without at least a very supportive spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it would be so hard if I didn't have Lila and she didn't have me. I don't know that I ever would have been an entrepreneur, at least I know I wouldn't have been to the level, that we eventually achieved. So So I told Lila when we got married, I'm going to start a company. And it's because in my family, that was kind of the normal thing to do, right? My grandfather, Italian immigrant, formed a construction company in Torrington, Connecticut. My father moves down to Virginia, founds a construction company. Then, like the Italian stereotype, also founds a concrete uh, plant, like ticking the boxes here. Um, and so, from a young age, I was just kind of designing company logos and, what my company be. I didn't know. I was excited about software and computers. So I told Lila, after we got married, I'm going to start a company in 2 years. We just have to save as much money as we can. And she's like, great, let's do it. And so we essentially, I mean, these are small numbers now, but we had $75,000 collectively in student debt, around 35,000 each, which seemed like a giant amount. And so we're kind of like, okay, we have to pay that. And we want to pay it off in, I forget, it's like 5 years. And we need to save as much money as we can to start a company. We don't know how much we need, but we know we're not going to get any from friends or family. We're unbankable. So she and I drove the same kind of beat up, Toyota Camry that we had in college. We lived in the crummiest apartment, that we could find, and just kind of saved every penny in this bank account. And, at the end of 2 years, we had something like $25,000. I think both our salaries were like 30,000 each or 35,000
Right.
each. So, and we're paying our loans off at the same time. And so that's what we started with. And the plan was always, okay, I'm going to start writing code and see if we can, kind of create a business selling engineering programs. I was really into designing concrete and steel reinforced retaining walls. I wrote one of the first computer programs to do that. I felt like, maybe there's a market for professional engineers that want to move from kind of a pencil and paper world to software. So I said, Lila, if you keep working and can kind of keep the lights on at your job, I'll see if there's a market for this. And so I was kind of, at the kitchen table writing code, and I proved there was not a market for that. I couldn't really sell it. I was a little too early, I think. But what I did kind of for the first year, Lila's still working. I'm kind of, writing software that nobody's buying. I was not very good at marketing, and it was very, very early, kind of pre-internet. I mean, this is like 99, the .com thing is happening, but you couldn't really, the way to market was still in kind of paper magazines and, events. So I started writing a lot of articles in things like, Java Programmers Digest and, all these kind of software magazines, presenting at like a software development best practices conference. And I got approached at a conference by someone who said, look, I represent a government agency. We're using a lot of the technologies you just described. It's going really, really poorly. Would you come in and help us out? And so that customer turned out to be the FBI, right across the river in DC, Pennsylvania Avenue. And they had tried to adopt a software pretty early in kind of a client server architecture, and it just was not working for their field agents. And I said, look, this is never going to work. I could probably rewrite it for you. When's the deadline? And they're like, 6 months from now. And I said, okay, I'll work night and day. I'll write this for you, but I never want to have anything to do with a government customer again. So I started working on that. It was just like, you guys are like totally disorganized, right? And I was able to deliver the thing to them that the agents could use in the field that they liked. And I then just left. And I said, okay, Lyle, I think we have a business in this kind of world of kind of enterprise software. It's not really engineering oriented, but this was a successful project. I think this is the direction we can go. And so I started working for a lot of the .com companies. If you remember PSINet, in the DC area, there were a lot of, the DC metro market was really kind of one of the hubs of the .com kind of startup land.
Yeah.
Started working for those companies, and Lila was able to quit her job, come over, and then we just, kind of rocked it from there. I mean, it was from 99 until 2010 when we sold the company, we had 250 software developers and sold to SRA International. And then kind of, at 39, kind of our lives changed.
So how did you know, Adam, when it was time for her to quit her job and come on full-time in the business?
It was one of the mistakes I made. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that read books like The E-Myth do the same thing. I was writing all the code in the company, and I'd hired people, but I was still kind of a micromanager. I would walk around everybody's screen and say, don't do it that way, change this. There was a point where I was kind of like, Lila, I'm working 20 hours a day. I can't really grow this company anymore. It's like, for the people that are sitting at this one table, I can manage them, but I don't think we can get any bigger. And that's when it was like, all right, Lila, if you come over to the company and help kind of organize this thing from just like an all engineer, no organization kind of business.
Right.
Maybe we can grow it beyond like my internal ceiling. And so that's what happened. I mean, Lila came in, looked at it, what I was doing for a little while, and it was like, you just can't write any more code. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, you're like a tyrant. You're like everyone's afraid to do anything. You're a perfectionist. She's like, you're hiring these great software engineers, but you're not, she's like, I think what you should be doing is going out and meeting with technical customers, representing the company. She's like, I'll manage them. You get out there and don't write code. And so we were only like a dozen people at the time, maybe. And I had a meeting and I said, I'm not writing any more software. And everybody was kind of like, what? What are you going to do around here, man? And, but I really, and the other thing that kind of happened is 9/11 happened, right? So that was kind of, it's hard for young people to kind of realize what that meant in the DC area, but I had, as I said, kind of turned my back on government, entities as being too bureaucratic. But one of the things that had happened was I'd had a top secret clearance as a result of the work that I was doing for the Bureau. And they were very accommodating about getting my company a top secret facility clearance. And I was helping them with some things, but it would be, I kind of left them for a while, and I was in a bagel shop in Tyson's Corner, and this guy came up to me. He's like, hey, my manager's really been looking for you. And I was like, who's your manager? And he mentioned this guy at the Bureau. He's like, we really, we really like that piece of software is still going strong.
This is the FBI.
So they knew where you were. They're like, hey,
right,
just go. I know he's at the bagel shop. I should go just catch him there. He's usually there at this time.
It's one of those things, though, that I feel bad about trying to talk to young people about being smart and strategic about their market niche, because I was the opposite. I was reluctant. I ignored, what turned out to be my best customer base. And it was a happenstance that kind of reconnected me that way.
But you did a good job. I mean, it sounds like you haven't said that. It seems like you're kind of a person that's not going to say, hey, we're really good. You obviously by yourself wrote this program for the FBI, and the agents could use it where they couldn't do it themselves. That's pretty significant, right?
The reality was they had wasted millions of dollars on something that was supposed to be kind of a nationally fielded evidence it doesn't matter what it was, but it was an important system, and it was going to be a huge black eye. And I said, if I work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, multiply that by 4 months, I have a little bit of time for test. That's the type of like sprint that it was. But I was young. I could work like that. But you're right.
It was your first gig, right? You're like, hey, let's go.
It was my first real gig.
Yeah.
It was not, designing software for steel reinforced retaining walls, but it was really cool. And that's why I think they were so willing. And plus, pre 9/11, the standards of kind of security clearances and everything were a little bit different. It was a little faster, a little less, kind of bureaucratic. And so they pulled a lot of strings to allow a very young, unproven company to have kind of a higher level of access than would typically happen.
So when you reflect back on this, Adam, like, you guys obviously, you sort of built this, like you said, kind of started through happenstance, but it obviously was very intentional later. I mean, you built this into a pretty significant sized company. What are the biggest mistakes, if you think about it, that you made along the way in that sort of at whatever point, either the earlier days or as you built this thing?
I can say one critical mistake is we were woefully undercapitalized. And so, I mentioned that we had saved either 20 or 20, I should remember this, it was $25,000, I think, we had in our bank account. We had no line of credit. Both of our families were kind of like, good luck. We give you moral support, but we can't give you any money to do this. So we, at some point, just by the way the cash flow was going, hit the wall where we couldn't make payroll. And we were just kind of like, what are we going to do? I mean, we were totally like, our backs were up against the wall. And I know this happens to a lot of good companies where you have receivables. Even though we had saved money for 2 years, it wasn't enough. And the only thing that saved us was American Express sent over these paper checks as like an incentive to transfer your balance from another credit card to American Express. I actually wrote one of those checks out to myself and cashed it at the bank to like bridge payroll. It's terrible.
It worked.
It worked. So it was supposed to be like written to Visa to like, like pay off your balance. I just wrote it to like Platinum and cashed it. And it actually worked where I could make payroll. And then, we actually got, an invoice paid. But it's one of those like near death experiences where for a lot of small businesses, if they have no access to credit, they can just disappear. And I did not have enough cash. So that was one, really bad mistake.
Before you go on to the second one, how large were you when this occurred?
I mean, it was a significant payroll. So we had at least like 6 or 7 employees at the time.
I was wondering, like, just you and your wife. I mean, this was
this is a check.
This was like a significant, like, I didn't know what the limit on this was. I didn't,
Find out. See,
exactly.
Wait, I got another one. You take this one too? Put that in, see if it goes.
It's so crazy. And the stress of that, like Lila and I would be walking through the supermarket and we would just kind of turn to each other sometimes and just like hug each other and be like, is this going to work? Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. We had,
like, what are we doing?
Well, we had, and I don't know if you remember, but, back in like 99, 2000, 2001, laptops were really expensive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were like, I don't know, they were big bucks, and Dell leased us laptops for all of our employees. And they were really big on personal guarantees and we're going to come after you. And so, you're personally guaranteeing everything down to like the laptop, the lease on the office, and you've got just like razor thin bank reserves, and everything is a matter of kind of juggling, like, when do I pay this bill to, So that was, early on kind of a mistake that was, near death. I mentioned, and I don't know if you all have read the book, The E-Myth. I mean,
I have, yeah. Michael Gerber, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it made a big impact on me. I mean, the example they gave was a lady who is good at baking pies, opens a pie shop, and she's bakes them all the time and has no time to. So I mentioned that mistake of just, I was like the pie lady, but I was like the software guy, right? There was no time to, market to customers or do the things that eventually helped us grow. And I think, one of the things that I did when I decided that I would spend more time, kind of externally facing, I still didn't appreciate how important health is. And so I think one of the terrible mistakes I've made that I try to always counsel founders that I invest in and work with is I started developing a lot of weird kind of stress related like maladies. They were nothing that you could point to and say, oh, you have X. It'd be like once I got shingles, I had this like huge like shingle outbreak on my face, and I'm like in my 20s. The doctor's like,
you're supposed to be 80 when you get shingles.
Exactly. Yeah. The doctor's like, I think you have shingles. I was like, really? She's like, yeah. Are you under a lot of stress? I was like, I bathe in it. I'm.
What are you talking about? I have a question for you, Adam. So, Greg and I have had these conversations before, obviously, and you talk about bathing in the stress. Like, what was your expectation when you started a company, and then what did you learn when you were there? And do you think you have more of a tolerance now for that being in a tough situation?
I was horrified of the embarrassment of failure. And so Lila and I never, for the first couple of years, I mentioned Lila was working, then she came over, and it was still like we said to our accountant, what's the minimum we can pay ourselves where the IRS will believe this is a real business? And he's like, well, I think $30,000, what is his salary? We're like, okay, that's our salary. So we were still living very frugally. And I remember once Lila said, hey, I was talking to my friends and they have something called a 401k. And they've, they're actually like saving money. And I said, Lila, that's not for us. Like, this thing is our 401k. Like, this has got to work, like forget saving money. And so I was putting a ton of pressure on myself to say, I will be embarrassed if I fail. We've saved no money. We've kind of put everything into this. It's got to work. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. I became very used to stress to the point where it was kind of like it felt normal. And so one of the weird things that would happen is I would seriously work 20 hours in a day. And then I have 4 hours to like go home, drink a beer, take a shower, like sleep for a little bit, go back. And I could kind of build up like a tolerance to not sleeping for long periods of time. But then if I did like actually get some sleep on a weekend, I would kind of lose my tolerance. And then I would say, oh, I've got to build it back up now. It's almost like this weird thing where like the body can be used to just a constant state of stress. And then when it gets a little relief, like it starts to rebel and you need to like whip it back into shape. What I try to tell people is, I was very fortunate that everything worked and there were no serious health issues. And we sold at a young age, 39, where, I've still got my health. We could still do things, we're not, disabled but I also have a bunch of stories of other I've got almost all my friends are entrepreneurs. I've got a lot of stories that didn't end up very well, right? Either they ended in divorce, heart attack, heart disease, drinking. It's just, so I kind of feel like I escaped by the skin of my teeth. And I try to tell everybody that'll listen now, I think I could have done it all the same way. It might have taken like an additional year or two, or, like who can tell what the timing would have been. Or it might have been, even better if I had just, tried to get some sleep and have some balance. And so I think, when you ask, I guess your original question was like, what did I think it would be? I was kind of like, I will do anything, including sacrifice every bit of my health to make this business a success. Like I was that committed, which isn't necessarily a great level of, I I don't know, a great level of balance, right?
What was your wife's situation at this point? Was she in the same sort of that kind of level of anxiety and everything that you were, or was she like more of a balance to where you were?
Much more balanced. And one of the things that happened too is, we had 3 kids. And so, she was working just as hard, but she would also be like, hey, I got to take care of this crying baby, right? And so, and by the way, we brought all our kids to the office every day. It was like a daycare, right? It was just like,
Right.
we're walking into a meeting, like holding a baby. And, but I think she just naturally she was just set up better. I think it's weird if I said, hey, Lila, like, let's go sit in this park, but the park says like it closes at 6 p.m. and it's like 6:15, she'll start to get like really nervous, right? Like, hey, we're breaking the law. And I'll be like, I don't care, right? We have certain different tolerances, but when it comes to like, Lila, if we don't do this, like we could lose this customer, she would kind of be like, is that the end of the world? And I'd be like, yes, it is. And she'd be like, nah, we'll be okay, So
Yeah.
I think much more balanced. And I think, I don't know. I mean, that's, I think a partnership works really well. I've generally seen in other people that not necessarily married, but just business partners, you typically have that kind of difference in temperament. Like if there were 2 of me's, the business would have just like exploded, right?
Yeah. And I think, a lot of times when you see spouses working together, and Peter and I, started this podcast by joking around about our spouses, but they're very much invested in the businesses that we have started in a different way. They weren't involved in the business day to day, but at the same time, there's no way that we could have started our companies without them. Like you just, for number one, the balance, and number two, actually being able to kind of, to raise a family and do all those things at the same time, where those things just simply would not have worked. Right. And I think you said something early on that's really important. It's like, regardless of whether it's your spouse or it's a significant other or it's your business partner, having that kind of anchor, because that founder mindset, we talk about this all the time, Peter, on the podcast, right? That founder mindset is so explosive and addictive and like just, off the rails so much that if you don't have it, like you said, I think it's really easy for the wheels to come off quickly.
Yep.
And you talk about like the health issues, the depression, the alcoholism, all the divorce, all the other stuff, right? That kind of comes along with it.
I don't think there's a person we talked to that hasn't said something about health or mental health issues or trying to deal with failure in these moments. And one of the biggest things, if you haven't started a company, or if you have, you'll know that one of the biggest things is sweating payroll. That is one of the hardest things as a founder that will drive you crazy, thinking like, how am I going to make payroll? I did a check writing thing too. It was like they said like the credit cards were like, hey, Adam just showed us a new idea. We can just send him a check and they can write to anyone, and then we could charge him our credit card fee. Right. And so I did one of those deals, and I was like desperately trying to pay that off, and it just was like the biggest. It wasn't very fun to be around. When stuff like that happens, because you get more into your head and not external, and some people around you need you to be external. So how did you, when you went through that, what would your advice be to a founder, to a significant other, whether they're a partner or not? I mean, you obviously had a partner. Like, they're a partner in your business no matter what. They don't have a choice. Like, in a way, it's good that she was in there to kind of say, hey, stop writing code. Yep. And you were willing to listen to her, right? That says a lot about your relationship. Tell us what you would suggest to a founder with their significant other, whether they're in the business or not. What would your advice be to them?
One of the things that, they say that most marriages end because people are disagreeing about money, right? I mean, they're fighting about, we need to make more money. You're not making enough money. We're spending too much money. I feel like there has to be an understanding amongst the married couple that this is going to be hard and we're not going to have the money that our friends do, and we're going to appear to be driving pieces of crap cars when they have like a nice car, and we're, it's a level of sacrifice where I feel like if one or the other isn't in, I don't know if you do it, right? I mean, it's kind of like, because I think that we were so fortunate in that we were both exactly aligned. To this day we are, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're aligned on kind of valuing kind of experiences over physical stuff, and not buying kind of for status, and we were that way at the beginning. I think the other thing is, being an entrepreneur is so lonely, and you won't get much sympathy from people where it's like, oh, it must be nice having, everybody do what you say. And it looks like your company's pretty successful. And like, what are you complaining about stress?
You can get them to do what you say.
We're going to do another podcast if you got that one figured out. Yeah.
But it was great for me because Lila and I had 100% trust.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a business partner that you could talk to 100% honestly about anything going on in the business, good or bad. And you knew that they would be kind of understanding, right? If a founder does not have that in their spouse, they need to find like a forum. Like I also had an EO forum, or at the time YEO, Young Entrepreneurs Organization, which was also super.
You go back to my days in YEO then.
YEO, man.
So you were in YEO in DC. So you were right with like Vern and
Vern. Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that when we end recording, because we'll talk about for the rest of the podcast.
Exactly.
If not,
I have stories about that group.
Actually. Oh yeah.
I have some friends who their wife just says, "I love you, but I can't talk about this stuff. Like, it makes me too stressed out. You can't come back and tell me that, like,
the world's going to end.
The world's going to end.
You're not going to make payroll. Like, this thing could be done tomorrow. Like, all that stuff. Yeah.
So I knew some folks like that. And I think, a forum or some other kind of group where you can just air out the good, the bad, and the ugly is a requirement. Because if you just hold it all in, it's like, man, I think
not going to
self-destruct.
Yeah.
So I know you guys want to talk about YEO later. Why don't you explain to people what that is? And this is the type of group that you need to go find. And it doesn't have to be this organization, but an organization like that. Why don't you tell them what that's all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. There was a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Fairfax, and it might've been Vern got up and he gave this presentation on, Young Entrepreneurs Organizations, group for entrepreneurs. You're going to get, 8 or 9 folks. We're going to pull you into a forum, and they're going to be folks in different industries, but they're kind of at the same stage of, kind of their evolutionary, they're evolving their business. And you're going to meet and talk through kind of business issues. And this organization will provide a bunch of resources in terms of how to better interview, how to do cash management, all these things. I listened to this pitch and I was like, sounds great. Where do I sign up? And he gets to the last slide and it says, minimum of 1 million in revenue to qualify. And I was like, oh, might as well be $1 billion. Like, come on, I just felt like, man, $1 million in revenue. These guys are the Commodore Vanderbilt over here. But, like in a year or 2 or 3, like I did qualify. And so it's to try to find folks. And now there's an YEO rebranded to EO. There's an EO accelerator for folks that aren't at the $1 million level. There's a bunch of organizations, right? There's, or masterminds or things where people are organized into these groups, and the stuff that is shared in there gets deep, right? I mean, it's business and personal. It's, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to lose my wife because of this, and I need help, or I'm going to, I'm facing a terrible financial situation in my business. My CFO, stole from me, and I need to go talk to the bank. Like, how do I do that? It's just those type of experiences that you really can't talk to anyone else, right? Like, you can't go to your employee and say, hey, the CFO stole money. What do we do? He'll be like, I'm going to get my resume out. That's what
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. See you later.
And I think, getting in those kind of communities, getting in those groups is so important. I talked to, one of the things when I invest in in companies. I mean, I tell every founder that we invest in is you've got to get in, whether it's EO or it's Vistage or it's or it's just a group of a
We've
few
done that
local
before.
people, right? Peter and I have done that
Yeah.
before,
We
right?
just had like 4 or 5 of us, and then we just got together.
Yeah,
Yep.
and but you got to get that kind of group because this is hard, right? I mean, this is, and
Yeah.
especially if you, and I think the common theme among the three of us here is we've all had incredibly supportive spouses through this, but but same thing, Adam. I mean, I know a lot of people who it's a bit more of a struggle, right?
It becomes a thing between the relationship. Not that it's always there. Just like any relationship, it's hard. And having a business makes it harder, right?
Right.
But it's interesting. There's a common theme. And again, Greg and I know our spouses really well. We did a lot of stuff together as couples and as families. And both of them don't care about the money part. Like they legit don't like really care about that. It's not a thing. And it's interesting you said that because that was a common theme, and that made it a lot easier, I think, because there's a lot of times when you don't have any,
You're exactly right. I mean, I think when expectations are unreasonable that, hey, this business is going to make us a ton of money, like, go for it, honey. Like, where is it? And it's like, it didn't work out. Right. I mean, it
not
gets
quite
really
yet.
hard.
You got to wait another year or two.
I can tell you, I made a horrible mistake that cost legitimately $4 million. Like a single mistake cost Lila and I $4 million. And when I told Lila, she said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." She's like,
really,
that's it.
That's awesome.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can't ask for more than that. It goes into buying a company that had a related party kind of buyer who then disappeared at post transaction. So that $4 million just evaporated. But it's a totally different horrible story. But like I know that there are wives out there who'd be like, "You idiot,"
Right.
And
what are you doing?
Yeah. And she's just like, "I know you're sad. I'm sorry that happened to you." And that's, I mean, I can't tell you what a blessing it is to have a partner like that, right, in life for everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that you said that struck me out when we first got started is like trying to figure out how to buy food, trying to figure out, and Peter and I both have our own, stories like this, right? And I remember starting my first company. It was around the same time as you were starting yours. This was 97, 98.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember buying a PC. This is like my wife was a school teacher who was off for the summer and thought she was getting paid for the summer, but turns out she was only getting paychecks. Like your paycheck had been divided by however many pay periods during the school year. So anyway, we thought we had this money that we didn't have. We literally spent every penny that we had buying a PC. It was a gateway PC. So that's remember the big PAL boxes, right? So and this thing was like $3,000, and that's literally every single penny that we had. And we would have parties, like have friends over to our apartment, because if we had friends over, they would bring beer.
Bring stuff.
But it wasn't about drinking beer, right? They would bring beer, but then they would leave the empties, the cans. So we could take the cans back, at the time, it was probably more now, but it was like a nickel on these cans, and be able to buy like bread and peanut butter.
Wow.
Like, I mean, but that, when you come from that place, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you come from that kind of sort of that real poverty mindset, right? It really truly does make things easier in a way, right?
I got to tell you, it's one of those things where I'm so glad we met when we both were destitute.
Right.
There was no like, well, I'm bringing some funds into this marriage. And, it's just like, which, people that are, when they're older and they get married, like there's kind of a a wealth imbalance, maybe like we were both less than zero.
Should we sign a prenup or like,
yeah, exactly.
What do we do? Do we like split the loaf of bread in the middle and like you take half, I take it? Like what?
Yeah, my net worth is negative. Your net worth is negative. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I think we were obviously super fortunate, and to have met when we did, got married when we did. I think the other thing too is just being young, and starting a company. I mean, I looked like a baby when I started my company. Yeah, I looked very young. I was, still getting like carded for alcohol, and so, there were some credibility issues where I was just like, "Are you, the owner of the company, or employee?" I mean, I was just, very very young, but had a ton of energy, and we, we could kind of do superhuman things. Where I look back at it, and it's like, how the hell were we doing that? How did we work that hard? How did we put in that effort? We were regularly working every weekend, and we had a lot of family members who were like, "Hey, you going to the barbecue?" It's like, "No, we're working this weekend." And they would say, "Oh, you guys are working too hard. You're working too hard." And then when we sold the company, I was like, "Whoa, must be nice." And I was like, "Well, do you remember 10 years of no sleeping and working on the weekends?" So I think that's another thing too, man. If people are getting married later and later, but it's like, whoa, I'm really happy I got married early, and we kind of did all this early.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of wrapping it up, Adam, what do you think if you were to kind of give a few pieces of advice to founders today, resources, lessons learned, like what do you, and I know you're now running your own family office, you're basically investing for a living at this point. What do you tell founders who are at that, who are looking at that 1 million level as like it might as well be a billion, right?
Right.
What do you tell them?
I mean, I try to give a lot of personal as well as business advice. I mean, and we've hit on a bunch of it, right? I insist, just like you do, that they join a group, and that they get a coach. I believe in coaching, which is something I never believed in when I was a headstrong kind of young guy. I also say, I try to help with kind of a cash projection, and just say, if you don't watch cash flow, you can have the best business in the world and it will kill you. And because I used a freaking paper check from Amex, and, I tell that story. And, just because I think when I talk to young founders, they're chronically underestimating the time it'll take to build a product, the expense it'll take, right? I mean, you look at some of these projections and it's like, okay, I would normally tell you to double it, but I need you to like triple this. And then like, let's add another 20% on there. Right.
Yeah.
And I also just warn them about maintaining their health. And so I've heard other people, I think, give bad advice here where they're saying, hey, if I invest in you, I want you to be, this is your heart and soul, and and I'm just kind of like, I'd much rather see you go into the gym in the morning. I want you to work your ass off. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to see you, sacrificing your health. I don't want to see you sacrificing your relationships personally. I want to see you kind of built for the long term. And I'm a long-term investor, right? I mean, I probably have a much longer horizon than a lot of folks. And so, I mean, the first company I invested in, Lawn Starter, was a company that's now 12 years old. I'm still invested in it. And I talk to those guys all the time, and it's just like, okay, they're doing, I don't know, 75 million this year. It's like, hey guys, no hurry. Like, let's just keep growing this thing, and they're like, you're pretty patient. It's like, well, what do we need to do anything with this company? Like, why do we need to?
Why do you want to get out now? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's just keep going, man. So yeah, I think that's the advice I try to give. And then just, I mean, everybody's different. And so I think there's a big mistake that early founders make. And you probably see this too, where it'll be like, hey, the three of us are going to start this company, and it's 33 and a third, 33. It's like, guys, let's talk about, this cap table. And there's really kind of one founder here, and just trying to help them with kind of their partner and equity kind of splits and expectations when they first found the company, because I've seen that go wrong so many times. And I always say I was lucky I was a 50-50 partner with my wife, and I trusted her 100%, but that usually doesn't work out that way. Like 50-50 partnerships usually don't work, right? Like we need to structure this so that,
Yeah. Well, it's great advice, Adam. And I think, it's funny. I mean, all of that is huge. This whole question on that concept of work, I think what's called like work-life balance is it's a funny one for founders, right? Because in a lot of ways, there's no such thing at all for a founder, right? But trying to coach an early stage founder on at least preserving a little bit of something, right? Just a little bit of, get on a bike, go for a run, go for a walk, go whatever you're going to do. It's never going to be balanced. It's not even going to be close to balanced, but you can take 30 minutes, right?
Exactly right.
You can change your eating if you can't get to 30 minutes. There's things you can do. Because I've seen the same thing. I mean, Peter and I have seen. We've had close friends not survive the experience. Where I had a foreign mate of mine that that had a heart attack at 36. Didn't survive. So these things happen, and there's got to be. You're never gonna. It's really funny. I think when every once in a while, I'm such a hypocrite on this, right? Because from an investor standpoint, sometimes you get investors or founders that will say, well, I want work-life balance, and that's why I'm doing this and things. And okay, I'm not investing.
Yeah, right.
I'm not doing that.
I want to slow down. No,
that's right. Yeah, no. That's not what we're doing here, right? But it's the type AAA investor or founder that you're trying to just convince them to carve a little piece, just take a little piece for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's
just don't orbit the sun this closely, right? Orbit it that closely.
That's right. Exactly. Well, Adam, this is great. This is really fun having you on. Really appreciate it. How do if somebody wants to reach you or connect with you, what's the best way to do it? Or if they want to reach out and chat with you or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the best way for me is on X or Twitter, at Rossi Adam. I respond to DMs and I take calls all the time with folks that want advice on business. LinkedIn as well. I'm just a little slower to respond to the LinkedIn messages, but either one of those places is the way to reach me.
Cool. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes. Adam, really fun having you on. This is great, and I look forward to convince your wife to come on, and
yes,
and we'll do this again so we get the other side of the story.
Absolutely,
that's right. We'll just put earmuffs on you so you can. So we'll do it professionally.
For sure.
So good to meet you, Adam. Awesome having you on. We'll see you next time on the Founders Journey podcast.